We're now ready to move on to the next major type of color management, and that's one that's scene-referred. Resolve supports two variations of scene-referred systems. One is Resolve Color Management, or RCM, and the other is ACES, or the Academy System. We're going to start with RCM. So again, what's the advantage of a scene-referred system? Well, a scene-referred system attempts to keep the values the same as they were when captured by the camera sensor. In other words, they stay in that linear color space. So that means there's no additional processing and there's no gamma correction. And this ensures higher quality as you apply your color grading and any visual effects. Another major advantage of a scene-referred system is the program itself manages the color transforms. So you can use a scene-referred system without applying LUTS, without applying DCTLs, or OFX plugins. And this makes it much easier to work. In addition, scene-referred systems make it easier to work with footage from multiple cameras. Let's give that a try. I have a brand new project here. The first thing I need to do is switch over to a scene-referred system. I'm going to go to my project settings, color management, and change the color science menu. I'll switch that to DaVinci YRGB Color Managed, or RCM. When I do that, I have some new menus. I have an input color space, timeline color space, and output color space. The input color space is the color space interpretation applied to all incoming clips automatically. However, you can change each clip individually. In fact, if you want to, you can bypass this completely and do all that work inside the Media tab. Timeline color space works like before. It affects the color space of the timeline and affects the way the color controls are mapped inside the color tab. The output color space affects the final output. So this would be the color space that you eventually want to render to. I'll leave these set to Rec 709 for now. I'll go ahead and save to make sure that I'm switched over to a scene-referred system. Let's see how this differs in Resolve 17. Here's 17. It's still on a display-referred system. I'll switch the color science to DaVinci RCM. Initially, there are fewer menus. By the way, if you open an older project that's using RCM in version 17, they'll list RCM with the legacy notation. They'll give you the old set of menus. At that point, you're free to switch over to the current RCM and get this new menu set. In any case, there's a new menu called the Resolve Color Management preset, which allows you to save time with common color management scenarios. It's set to SDR Rec 709 by default, which is for standard dynamic range television. With each preset, you'll see an explanation below it that describes how it works and what it's good for. There are other common presets you can switch to, one of which, DaVinci Wide Gamut, we'll discuss later on. If you like the earlier version of the program, where you have more control over the various inputs and outputs, you can switch this menu to Custom. And now you have all these additional menus for additional control. Once again, we have an input color space, timeline color space, and output color space. And these are set to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 because of our preset. There are additional menus we'll talk about later, such as the input and output DRT menus. Even though these three color space menus match, you're free to change them. For example, if you need to output to a different color space, you could change that menu. Let's import some footage. Because input color space is set to Rec 709, that'll be applied to any incoming footage where the program cannot read or understand the camera metadata. Let's see how that works. Go ahead and save this and import. Let's start with the Alexa shot. Looks pretty nice. Instead of being washed out from the logarithmic space, it has nice contrast. That's because the program read the metadata through RCM and applied an appropriate input color space. If you right-click on the footage, you'll see there's no LUT applied to the LUT menu, and there's a new menu called Input Color Space just above that. And here the program is automatically assigned the ARRI log C color space as an input. And this is correct for the footage, again based on the camera's metadata. Now if the program was unable to read the metadata or couldn't find an appropriate color space, it'll default to the project setting of Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Now this is automatic, but you're still free to choose your own color space if you feel that the assigned one is inaccurate. Let's try another piece of footage. This time the red shot. Now with raw shots it's a bit more complicated. It does look fairly nice here, but as a raw shot, you have to remember the interpretation is being applied to the raw settings. Let's take a look at the project settings in the camera raw section. And here, the red camera footage is decoded using the camera metadata. Let's go back and take a look at the input color space menu. Now, despite that, it's been assigned to the project Rec 709. Let's see what happens if we turn it to bypass. Bypass means there's no input color space assigned here. It gets a bit more contrasty. It looks a bit more attractive. So now the raw interpretation is purely through the camera raw section. Now you always have the option to change the code using to project. That would give you an opportunity to switch it to the IPP2 protocol as we discussed earlier. However, in that case, it'll return to a logarithmic look. You might have to reapply a different input color space. It's a bit more complicated, and you'll have to think about how to process your raw footage. Let's create a timeline. I'll select both of these clips, right mouse button click, and choose Create New Timeline. These are the default settings. I can switch to the other tabs to make sure that the colors are consistent. Edit tab, Color tab, and the Deliver tab. Let's go back to the project settings. Version 17 adds some additional menus to help control tone mapping, a big improvement over earlier versions. So we'll talk about input DRTs and output DRTs in a later video and discuss how those work with HDR and SDR. For now, we'll move on to the next scene referred system, ACES.